Enneagram friends, I am Uranio Paes, and I would like to share with you now the sixth key for Enneagram transformation. This is become human before you become spiritual. As you may know, the Enneagram is a pretty powerful and deep system that combines both psychological and spiritual growth. And it's important that we do both to get all the Enneagram has to give us. However, some people do much more psychological work and other people do much more spiritual work. And the result is not good. When the person does much more psychological work, the end result might be that the person does more something like the upgrade of personality, and also the person mistakes the self-development path for what is actually well-being. And unfortunately or fortunately, self-development doesn't have much to do with well-being, because sometimes we need actually to give up well-being for a while before we get to a certain developmental point. And well-being is not the goal. The goal is to develop, and sometimes we need to go through pretty harsh moments to do that, even feeling worse than before. And it's important also to understand that if you do too much spiritual work and not much psychological work, you may become a dangerous person. This is because, you will eventually have access to very powerful experiences and intuitions, power. And if you don't have that basis of doing work with your shadows, work with your issues in life since childhood, and also some existential issues, you may project your stuff and you may do things that are really not good for yourself and for others. So I do believe that both are important, and I believe that we need to work a bit more in the psychological dimension first. And this is a little bit what I want to say behind this phrase, become human before you become spiritual. Now, what does it take to become human? It's a very long story, but I'll try to summarize 5 things that I believe are key for all serious Enneagram student to take in as a challenge to become human. First one, you need to have access to all 4 basic human emotions. Fear, sadness, joy, and anger. So sometimes we say mad, sad, glad, and scared, right? This is a pretty sound model, although very simple, of the 4 basic human emotions. And many times, the vast majority of times, people do not have access to the 4 of them. Only to 1 or 2, sometimes 3. And it's very important for our self-development that we have access to all 4. And depending on your type pattern and also your subtype pattern or your instinctual sequence pattern or your family pattern or your national culture pattern, that you identify which of these emotions are not as easy for you, and that you build a whole agenda for you to be able to have access to it or to them. So the second thing about becoming human before you become spiritual has to do still with the lower emotional center and the emotions, but something different from what I've just said. It has to do with managing reactivity. So when we react, we are not in the lead of our own being. We are just letting things happen. We are just flowing with unconscious patterns. And reactivity has a few steps to be accomplished if we want to be really okay with it. So first step of non-reacting is learning how not to act out the emotions that you're feeling when it's not a good idea to act them out for any reason, for yourself, for others, for any reason. So you still feel everything with you, but you don't say anything or you don't do anything. You don't go to your reactivity, whatever your reactivity is, and each type has a different reactivity. So to start with, we need to spend a lot of time learning how not to do or say anything before we go to the second step of also changing the emotional pattern, changing what we are feeling. This comes only after a lot of rehearsal and training with the first part of not acting out what we are feeling. So we first deal with the behavior, and only later we deal with the emotional pattern and ways to change it. And there are very effective ways to change the emotional pattern. But then you will still need to include not acting it out. And finally, there is a third step for reactivity management, which is learning how to cultivate an inner state, an inner emotion, an inner emotional and mental state that's very peaceful and in which you will just not react. You will just not be reactive because you will not be connected to only the psychological side of you. You will be more spiritual, but this will come much later. And it's not a matter of this theme that we are talking about on this video of becoming human. This is already something very spiritual. So I think you get the point. Not only we need to access all emotions, but we also need to learn how to control our own reactivity. Now, there is a third thing that has to do with the lower mental center and our thought patterns. So if we want to grow up, we need to re-examine our thoughts. We need to re-examine whatever we think and understand that we are limited and we are just mimicking some thoughts that are communicated to us by our personality, which is limited. So the idea is to question our assumptions, is to question our paradigms and our beliefs, knowing that our beliefs are limiting beliefs. Any belief we may have, including the ones that might really look or sound positive. If they come from personality, they are limiting. Another thing about this is it's very useful to do the opposite of your tendencies, even if it doesn't make sense to you. So if you are a 1, even if it doesn't make sense to you, you may want to break rules or to do silly things and to do something a little bit wrong. Why? Because it's going against your pattern. Or if you're a 7, even if it doesn't make sense to you, it's useful if you just start voluntarily thinking about suffering, pain, both from the past and from the present. And 7s would say, why would I do that? What's the benefit? Well, the benefit is practicing neuron connections that you are not accustomed to practicing because you think only in one way. And the other benefit is having more experiences in life and allowing for a broader realm of life experiences. So it's important anyway, and it's not a matter of thinking if it makes sense or not. Just do the opposite. Now, a fourth point behind this key of becoming human before becoming spiritual has to do with the centers of intelligence. So you most probably know, and we have an ebook written on Mundo Enneagram on that. Make sure you download it if you haven't yet. An ebook on centers of intelligence. It's a free downloadable ebook. But so we have 3 basic centers of intelligence: head, heart, and gut, where we have thoughts, feelings, and sensations, right? And depending on our type, we use only one of them or two of them. And it's rare to find people who use all three. And Orage, a disciple from Gurdjieff, said this, that if you use only one or two, you're not a human being, you're a subhuman being, because you're not fully human unless you use the three centers of intelligence. So, are you a mental type who's not in touch with the full of emotions and the instinct? Are you an instinctual type 8, 9, or 1 who sometimes cannot manage to think properly or to feel as some other people feel? Or are you an emotional type who feels way too much instead of sensing or thinking? So whatever is your case, you need to make sure you do a self-assessment, looking inside and answering this. What are the centers that I'm not using enough? And situations that I'm using the wrong center because of blockages in other centers. And last but not least, the task of becoming human implies practicing presence. Presence in the first level of practice has to do with the body, has to do with being here and now and being in my body, being full in my body, and making sure I sense the body as a whole, not only one part of it. Some people feel like they are more of their heads, and others feel they are more of their hearts, and so on. So, and many times people feel blockages in the cervical area, or in the solar plexus, or in the pelvic ring. And this has to do with the instincts, actually, and we'll talk about this in other materials here on Mundo Enneagram. But you need to be fully in your body in a way that you are in touch with it all. Like it doesn't feel like that you have a body. It feels like that you are your body. It's very different. And there are many presence practices that allow you to get grounded and to come inside, in and down, and being in touch with the full of your body. If you do not do this, then you are not becoming fully human. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for the other keys of development here on Mundo Enneagram. Thank you and bye.